All right. Happy Monday night. Hope you guys are doing well. I'll run it down with a little AMA. We do have a guest later this week on Wednesday, so that'll be exciting. But tonight you guys are stuck with just me. So, per usual, anything goes. If you guys want to run down estate planning, macroeconomics, mitigating taxes, how to set yourself up for the other side of this bull run, starting to see some price action, starting to see breadth open up in the Russell 2000. I mentioned this before, but I don't know if you guys follow Blockchain Back or not. Kudos to him. Big call on breadth opening up and getting upside in the market. We did just see Tether print another billion Tether at their treasury. So money printer go burr, and Bitcoin is up a little bit since then. I think that'll continue to move into the rest of the market. Hopefully we do get a rotation into the altcoins here. Starting to see some things move already. XRP was up 20% on Saturday over the weekend, which was nice to see. I'm sure everybody's happy to have a little bit of green in their portfolio after a long bear market. So, I'm kind of numb to it either direction at this point. There's certain price levels that I want to get to, and then at those price levels, we'll be able to take profits and then mitigate tax implications and do all the things that we talk about here. So with that, we'll go ahead and run it down in the chat again. If you want to put it over there, whether you're on YouTube or you're on X, we can see your comments here in the chat. And if you do have good questions, we will definitely get to them and answer. So first up, we got Blue Dog Traveler. He says, last week, you said top 1% rich list would be a great bag, roughly 61,000 XRP. It's a great opportunity we have right now, even at 55 cents. I would tend to agree. I think, people look back at Bitcoin and some of the other assets that have appreciated substantially over the last decade. And if you bought Bitcoin at $2, $5, $7, under $10, under $100, you're not mad about what ended up happening there. I think the same thing will be the case for a lot of these altcoins that have the ability to be used at scale, have utility. These networks will be adopted for specific use cases and rolled into the financial system, and I think a bunch of different parts of your life. And you won't even know. It'll be like the internet. You'll just use it, and it'll work, and it'll be great, and you'll be happy, and you won't think anything of it. You'll just say, glad I have this, and it makes my life easier, and I benefit from it. So I don't really care how whatever protocol it is actually functions or works or the value gets there. I just care that it gets there and it works every single time. And that's really what XRP does. It's never been down over the entire time that it's existed. Solana can't say that. Ethereum can't say that. I don't think that there's any other blockchain that can actually say, maybe Hyperledger and maybe Hedera Hashgraph. I think either one of those probably, if they haven't had any downtime, it's been very minimal. So, and those things leave clues, right? So, things that you're going to be looking at to be making investments in, things that I'm looking at to make investments in on the other side of this. Success leaves clues, right? So, anyway, I would agree with Blue Dog Traveler here. What is that? 61,000 puts you in the top 1% at 55 cents. You're looking at, maybe $35,000, $37,000 invested to get there. And if that is enough to retire you, over the next 10 years, I don't know where else you could put it aside from digital assets and get that type of return where it's actually enough to keep up with inflation and put you in a position to retire a decade from now. Carl says things are getting exciting. Yeah, like I said, a little green in the market. People are happy. Portfolio is looking a little bit better than it has for a long time. So Crypto Future says, what are your thoughts on the FET to ASI merger? So Fetch, AGI, and there was one other one. There was 3 AI blockchains or projects that merged into ASI. I think that's a big deal. I think there's not enough, well, maybe in certain circles there are people that are talking about that and discussing it. AI is here to stay. It'll continue to grow. I think that it is a buzzword right now, and a lot of people say that they have AI. I think it's just, LLMs and some fancy coding in most circumstances. Really having an intelligence that can iterate on top of itself, we're still not there yet. I don't think that's too far off. I think some of the people that we're dealing with in that capacity, working on things, are building neural networks, and which are much more complex than the LLMs, and actually learn and iterate on top of themselves. So at some point, maybe within the next few years, that's when things will really start to take off and progress at a rate that I don't think even I really comprehend how quickly things will move after that point. If you have an intelligence that you can use as an assistant to be able to augment your efficiencies and also bounce thoughts off of, to be able to iterate much faster and run simulations, to figure out what the solution is going to be, that's going to get you to market fastest or do the best, or compete against, like you can ask it any kind of question, right? Like what type of technology would take out this entire industry and completely rewrite things, so that there'd be a completely different industry that took over that market segment. People will be using it for that type of stuff. They will figure out what the next iteration of technology is, and that's where they will be positioning themselves. You'll have, I've talked about this before, but if you haven't ever read The Future is Faster Than You Think, it's a book I would recommend. Talks about all the different technologies, and this was written before COVID, I think 2018 or 19. All the different technologies that were converging, within the next 5-6 years here. We're pretty close to that. He talks about nanotechnology, 3D printing, flying, like Uber's, AI, blockchain, smart contracts, just a lot of things that will automate the aggregation and segmentation of data in a repository, or create efficiencies to be able to trigger transactions within ecosystems between counterparties that may or may not trust one another, and then have an AI that can analyze all of that and then iterate on top of it. Just, it's going to be a cool time to be alive, I think. So, went off on my side tangent there, but I think that's a big deal, what you're mentioning here with Fetch and its merger to ASI. I haven't been following it as closely as I probably should, but it's definitely something that people should be watching. Teresa, thank you for being here, brother. He says, thank you. Love what you do. Thank your wife. Thank your wife to play a huge role in your achievements. Much love. She's good people. I'm glad to have her, and she does support things, so it's nice. Let's see here. Crypto Future again says, regarding Trump last Saturday, I knew somebody was going to bring it up. Do you believe it was a breakdown in security, incompetence, or something that was allowed? Your guess is as good as mine, man. That's a weird deal. I've seen, and again, I'm not a sniper. I'm not former military. I've never run security. I don't know how any of that stuff works. We have security people that we deal with for the family office. And I've talked to people that were previous military and have that background. They seem to think that it could potentially have been allowed, or that there was just severe incompetence, one of the two. Like for them to have missed that, and then him to get shots off and then immediately get him, just doesn't sit right. But thank God Trump didn't get hit. There was a few people that were injured, and my prayers go out to the gentleman that did pass away from the shot that he, took. Very sad situation for him and his family, being at the Trump rally and then having that take place. And from what I understand, he was former military too, so just not a good deal at all. I'm sure that they will, be beefing up security. I'm sure that the majority of those people that were on that detail got fired or removed. And it doesn't matter which one it was. Was it gross incompetence or was it allowed? Either way, not okay. And they're going to have people that are doing a better job, especially if Trump's going to continue doing the rallies, which I don't see him stopping, being out in public and doing that. He enjoys it, right? And obviously it aggregates a lot of attention and he has a lot of momentum. So I don't think he's going to stop. But yeah, interesting question here. I don't know which one it was. I don't have the technical background and the understanding to tell you, or the insight, on that track, or know anybody there to be able to tell you one way or another. Let's see here. XRP Junkies asked a good question. He said, thanks for the input as well. As usual, what's the impact of Ripple selling off 40% stake in Tranglo? I didn't know that happened, so this is news to me. But Tranglo is a big deal. They provide payments and international payment flows for a lot of nations in the East. So for them to liquidate a stake in that company, I mean, they did end up selling off a portion of MoneyGram back in the day after they were done working with them for a trial period. I think, that maybe that was the agreement. They would come in for a certain equity stake. They would allow them to use XRP, trial things, set their systems up, increase their revenue and sales. And then by owning the equity, Ripple would get upside, and then they would liquidate or sell it back at whatever valuation later on. Sometimes, companies do that because that incentivizes, whoever the partner company is to come in and really change things and provide benefits and increase margins and profits for a company. And then, the other company basically buys it back from them after they've got what they needed from the other party. And Ripple's done that in other circumstances. So that's probably what they've done here, would be my guess. There's probably still some residual benefit that Ripple's going to receive on the other side of that from Tranglo using their technology or integrating with them, but they no longer have an equity stake in their company to be able to control and basically mandate that they do certain things. And I'm sure that they made some good money by making Tranglo more profitable during the period that they did own that equity. Teresa says, I was wondering, what's your take on $10 million XRP? I'm just thinking all the debt would be tokenized, but I know that would come later maybe. The decimal places don't work out for a $10 million XRP. I think the most, it could get close, right? So if it's seven figures that could show up there, and then you have, drops that go down to 100th or a tenth, then you've got the pennies on the other side of the decimal there in the drops, or the tenth of a drop that they can send a transaction with. But to scale to 10 million, you would actually need another decimal place in the code. So you could have 9,999,999.99, but 10 millions, you literally can't do with the code. So close enough, I guess, for government work, horseshoes or hand grenades, if it really did get to those values. If it does, I think that's, like you mentioned here, just a long time from now. Maybe a couple decades, realistically. Like you got to have other interplanetary commerce and like a lot of stuff to have it at that price. Let's see here. This one's good. Jabrilk says, or Jabril K, last week you mentioned you didn't think Ripple would IPO. If that's the case, why do you think Link2 is selling shares. So Ripple's had 2 tender offers, both of which have been at 61.48. We run private deals in the mastermind. We have investments on their cap table, and so I'm familiar with that. We haven't participated in our funds, but we have had the option to be able to do that. So there has been liquidity, and basically double your money or triple your money if you got in at $20 a share, which is where Link2 bought the majority of their shares that they sell on their platform. You don't always have, so there's 2 main ways that you could have a liquidity event for a company. One would be IPO or a public offering of some kind, and that could be a direct listing. It could be through a SPAC. It could be a traditional IPO or a merger, reverse merger. Like, there's a couple different ways that you could get publicly traded if you're a private company. And then the other way that you could have a liquidity event would be getting acquired by another private company, potentially, that bought people out off the cap table. Or the company could buy back shares at a premium, like they have with the tender offer. So you're not just limited to specifically an IPO for a liquidity event with Ripple, even though that probably would be and most often is the largest way that you could get a return for your investors. I don't think so let me be pedantic here. An IPO specifically, I don't think will happen for Ripple. A direct listing, yes, could possibly happen for Ripple. That would be like Coinbase, where they sold the shares that were held by the private investors onto the open market at the listing, and that would be a direct listing. Normally, for an IPO, you would go through a roadshow. You would dilute some of the shareholders that you have to be able to issue new stock to the investment bank so that they could parade it around to their private wealth clients and get people in on it. And then they make a bunch of money, and you really don't make as much money if you do an actual IPO. Ripple has enough clout and recognition at this point that I think they could do the direct listing. I'm confident that the investment banks already have allocations, and I think that is a possibility. And if that were the case, they'd file an S1. The fastest they could really do that after the approval by the SEC would be like 25 or 30 days post S1 filing. And maybe that's the case. Ripple wants to be the Amazon of crypto. A publicly traded company would very well mirror Amazon, right? They've had multiple stock splits. If they get listed on the Texas Stock Exchange and BlackRock and Citadel, have a tokenized stock exchange here in Texas, which I'm hopeful for. I'm biased, I live here. Then they would never have to do a stock split. You'd be able to buy fractionalized shares of Ripple. I do think that there could potentially be a dividend for Ripple if that takes place. But yeah, I think that there's I don't want to say a high likelihood of an acquisition, but a possibility for sure of like a BlackRock coming in and scooping Ripple up before they do IPO, because post IPO, it's going to be difficult to acquire something like that. And unless there's something that I don't know about the escrow, I have a hard time believing that Ripple is just going to control the release of that XRP globally and hand that out or dole it out to countries, nations, banks, enterprises, all that stuff. I think that it would need to be somebody or a company or a government with more authority. Maybe the IMF could be the situation there too. And maybe that's part of their IPO. They've got to hand over that piece of their business. What gets me, though, is that Consensus, Brad Garlinghouse, rolled the escrow and the XRP there into the valuation of the company, which he's been very specific not to do every time I've heard him speak before that. So it's just interesting to me. I get on here and I talk through things. Like I said, take everything I say here with a grain of salt. People ask good questions and I come off and give a specific answer. But hopefully that gives you a little more clarity around why I say there won't be an IPO. It could be a direct listing, could be a SPAC, reverse merger, would be the other way, or, well, I don't think it'll be a SPAC, but more likely an acquisition or a direct listing. Here's one. Jordan says, I have a weird question. Why are there so many projects that have X in them? This is a good question. I can answer this. XLM, XRP, XDC. I have to name a few. Could that have anything to do with Elon changing Twitter to X? It could. So when you put an X in front of a ticker for an asset, it means it's non-jurisdictional. So like gold is XAU, commodities that aren't specific to a certain country that trade have an X in front of them. And so that's why you would start a ticker with an X. If you wanted it to be used interchangeably by nation states and sovereign countries for exchange of trade or swapping, and it not be tied to one specific country, you put an X in front of it. Eric says, very grateful for the private Discord. The group is very helpful for me so much. Has helped me so much. Big shout out to Future. He's clearly someone who cares about the members. Big shout out to Future. And he is very much appreciated. He's been in the group since the beginning, and we definitely wouldn't be where we are without him. So he is super appreciated. And like you said, we'd love to have people here in the mastermind group. If that's something that you're interested in, you can go check it out at mastermind.beyondbroke.com. And Eric, we are pumped to have you in there. Hopefully, you continue to get value from it. And, if you have any comments, constructive criticism, feedback for myself, reach out to me or the moderators, and we can make sure that we're doing our best for you, brother. So thank you for the kind words. Can you cut a handlebar beard for the next live? I could. My wife never wanted me to have a beard for the majority of our relationship, and then I just decided I was going to do it because I needed to look older and a little bit more seasoned or wise for some of the stuff that I was doing, and now she won't let me get rid of it. She says I look weird if I shave the beard off. And especially now that I have the shaved head, if I shave the beard off, I think it would be just too much. But maybe, we get rid of this here and just do handlebars, mustache rides, Let's see. We did just have a meetup for the mastermind. And Poloni 65 has mentioned, she said she really enjoyed the meetup Saturday here in Dallas. And that's her name there. We'll take that off. I don't want everybody to just know who she is. But yeah, we do meetings for the mastermind group, which are pretty cool. And it's always nice to be able to see people in person, real life. What's the acronym? IRL, is that what people say now? In real life instead of online? But yeah, we get together and we do that. We try to do that at least once a quarter for our mastermind members. Just get together and share some drinks and get to chat and have a good time. Sometimes it's here in Dallas. Sometimes it's off in other parts of the country. XRP Junkie says, follow-up question from the last week. When establishing an LLC, what would it be in the business of doing? If trading, wouldn't that be more considered investor? Wouldn't we be considered more investors than traders? This is a good question. So you're setting up a holding company or an asset management company. It's not in the business of trading, but you can be. So, early on, a lot of people had that question. There's a couple different NAICS codes that we provide people with, depending on what you want to designate your business as. I would recommend, an asset management company would be the way that I would go, or an investment company. You're not going to pool other people's capital. You're in the business of managing assets and providing management services to those assets or companies that are subsidiaries that hold assets. If it's a trading company, you get locked into a few things. So if you're in the business of trading, nothing's ever long-term capital gains. You're always having income, irrespective of, what you're doing. Even if you have held the assets over a year, it's going to be assessed as income and taxed that way. So could be good, could be bad, just depends on what you want. The benefit there, though, I would say, is that you're only taxed on profits or loss at the end of the year. And so you don't have to record. I mean, you do still have to record every single transaction, but it's either up or down at the end of the year. And whatever you made is what you're taxed on. If you lost, then you write that off against previous year gains. So anyway, that's the thoughts there. But it's in the business of managing assets is what the LLC does. Here's Max is nice enough. He says, I don't say this enough on here. If you do get value from these, please press the like button. It does help the algorithm and help out the channel. And please share it with somebody that you know if you think it's valuable for them. Let's see here. This is a good question. Wald Gardner says, what makes an LLC better than one from another state for digital assets? So 3 things in Wyoming. One is no state tax in Wyoming. I'm that way here in Texas. You get that in Florida, and there's no state tax. Number 2 is going to be attorney-client privilege. So you get that in South Dakota, Nevada, Alaska, Delaware, and Wyoming. Are the 5 states that you normally get that in here domestically. So basically, whoever files it, that's whose name and address appears on there for public record. And it makes it a little bit more difficult for people to figure out who's associated with the entity. FinCEN is, you got to file your BOIR now within 90 days if you file an LLC this year. But the last piece of that, so you got no state taxes, attorney-client privilege. The laws and legislation that's been drafted there in Wyoming has a lot of benefits for digital assets. So you get a lot of leeway. It's not as scrutinized as other jurisdictions for that. They've been really progressive in the legislation there for digital assets in Wyoming and really welcoming for businesses that are doing business with digital assets there. And so for those 3 reasons, we choose Wyoming to set up the majority of the entities if they are going to be domestic here to the U.S. for our clients. Carla Pitt says, thank you for your lives. Glad you're here, and I'm glad that they are valuable for you. She says, in the past, you mentioned Portugal was a good option for crypto. I'm living in Portugal, but I was thinking to transfer crypto to Malta, a company instead. Thoughts? I think either one of those are a great option over there in Europe. Both of those provide tax protections. You're there in Portugal, so up to you. We have Saks Global is our partner over there. They are a Swiss-based firm that can set up bank accounts and entities across the broader EU and globally. So if you want some information with them to have a conversation to see what's going to be the best for your situation, happy to share that with you. Just email us at info@digitalfamilyoffice.io. We have a super chat for 589, which is awesome. He says, "Hola. After price appreciation, I'd like to hold my XRP and perhaps even earn interest or dividends. What are the avenues and how much interest?" So we had a call today. The way that we've structured the fees for Digital Wealth Partners, we actually don't make any money until we produce our clients at least 8% returns, and there's no catch up on the other side of that. It's just all to the client up until 8%. And so we're looking for ways to be able to achieve that right now. Our current partners are a little bit lower than that. It's enough to pay for the fees on the accounts and put a little jingle in your pocket. Somewhere between 2 and 5% is what we're able to get people right now for holding assets in institutional custody. So that's what we're working on. Continue to build out partnerships with institutional partners to be able to provide that. As far as I'm aware, we're the only wealth management firm right now that provides any way to earn yield on your XRP in qualified custody. And so that will become available to our clients next month, finalizing things over the next 15 days here in that regard. So great question. And it's not really dividends. Dividends would come from a company or a stock that you held that paid that out to people on the cap table or that held stock. These would definitely just be income from avenues that we have to be able to put the asset to work. This one's interesting. Mando says, do you think we could get XRP at BTC price per coin faster than Bitcoin got there? To 60,000, Bitcoin's taken 15 years to get to $60,000. XRP's been around 12. So we've only got 3 years left to get to 60,000. Or are you saying from now, like same price point to that period? I'd need a little bit of clarification around that. I'll give you both, just off the cuff here. It's possible that we could see XRP at a similar price to Bitcoin in 3 years from now. Just depends on how fast adoption takes place. If things really ramp up and things are ready in the background that I may not know about, and they're able to really scale things up faster than maybe I comprehend, then sure, yeah. If you got derivatives on board within the next 3 years, I could see a scenario where XRP's $50,000, $60,000 with that amount of liquidity necessary to be able to move those transactions at scale. And the adoption, across other markets as well. If you're talking about, like 50 cents to 60,000, I would say yes. I think that we'll be at that price before the end of the decade, or close to the end of the decade, or maybe a little bit after. Somewhere around 2030. I think is actually a reasonable time frame for the amount of adoption that needs to take place to have price at that level. So I don't know if that answers it does answer your question. I answered it a couple different ways, but hopefully the way that you intended to ask it did get answered. Appreciate this. STO says, greetings, hair's looking good. Yeah, kind of like falling out a little bit on the sides here, but that's supposed to happen, right? He says, wonder if you have any itchiness or infection or any complications. I haven't really had anything. I have pretty good blood flow, just because I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or anything, but I try to take care of myself. And I train often. I do cardio. I eat well, fairly healthy. And we did follow the protocol that they gave us. They were very specific about how often to wash it and what to put on it and what to do. So I haven't really had any, complications or pain. Been dry a little bit, but I've got stuff that I'm putting on it for that. And then, I think that it'll end up growing out good. It's a year-long deal. Most people don't really see the full result for the hair transplant for at least 6 to 8 months at a minimum. If you're, recover fast and things go really well, sometimes it takes up to a year. So I'm patient. I've held XRP just like a lot of other people. And so however long it takes is how long it takes. And that's okay. As long as I get the results I want. Right. So David's kind of backing it up here. He says, if XRP does hit 60K and I have a bag, why do I need DAG? You don't necessarily need us, David. I just want people to surround themselves with the right professionals and figure out what they're going to do with the assets. A lot of people, I'll just say this. Making wealth and maintaining wealth are two very different things, especially across multiple generations. If you don't have a charter or a family compass with core values or mission statement and principles for the family, along with governance documents and ethics documents or systems in place to be able to make sure that you've got a board that oversees the best interest for the family, and then also investment professionals that are segregated from the family that are helping you make good decisions and providing you with the analytics and market research that are needed to be able to make sure that you're staying ahead of the trends in whatever industry you're making investments in, becomes very difficult, especially when you're 2 or 3 generations in and there's animosity between people. If they are involved in the management of the capital, people get, what's the word I'm looking for? They make poor choices just to spite other people. Spiteful, I guess, would be the word I'm looking for. And so you just want to make sure that, irrespective of working with me, I would read books on family office. I would understand how that operates. I would look at setting that up. I would get your stuff into institutional custody, whether it's with us or another provider. If you do set up a trust, you're going to need, if you complete the gift, you're going to need an RIA to manage those assets on your behalf because you cannot have control of them in that circumstance. Same thing with an IRA. If they're there and you want to be able to produce yield, you're going to have that with a wealth manager. And same thing if you set up PPLI or another insurance product. Has to be structured a specific way, and you will need an RIA or another team to be able to help you with that. So, again, just doesn't have to be us. I'm just looking to be able to provide some insights for people and make sure that they are aware of the things that they're going to need on the other side of this, and that they are being proactive to be able to, aggregate at least the knowledge and maybe the personnel now before the money shows up. Because again, and I've said this before on here, once the money shows up, you're not going to necessarily know people's intentions. I would say, we differentiate ourselves because we're going to participate in this with you. We're going to do really well ourselves. A lot of what I've set up is selfish, and so I'm able to share that with other people and provide those benefits. Obviously, I can't use our RIA to manage my assets inside my trust and do some of the things that I'm looking to help other people do, which I have good partners for my personal stuff. Anyway, hopefully that gives you a little bit better insight into just some of the things that you should be thinking through if XRP does hit 60K a piece, how to be able to manage that and make sure that you're mitigating the risk of loss over multiple generations. Let's see here. Never a stupid question, Teresa. He says, is there any chance of getting a loan against an asset that cannot be withdrawn in any way, but can be clawed back by the issuer? Like maybe, yeah, it's not a stupid question because there is a clawback feature on the XRP. Also, XRP itself cannot be frozen or clawed back. The origination account has been black holed. That's why there can never be more than 100 billion, and there's less and less of it every single day. So if XRP is the collateral for the loan, you don't have any circumstance like this. And this is something that they're working through right now for the AMMs, and then also what will affect the liquidity pools later on. If the assets that are issued can be clawed back, they can be pulled out of that liquidity pool if there's something wrong. So banks like to have that for insurance, right? If you send a payment and you need to claw it back, you'd like to have the means to be able to do that. I think the better way to set that up would be to have a circumstance in which it's kind of like a proof of ownership. So if you send an asset from one wallet to another and your identity is tied to the other one, it's fine. You're swapping between wallets. It's not a big deal. If you send it to somebody else or an outside party and that transaction hasn't been verified or wasn't certified by you, or there needs to be some other qualifier, and they get a hold of it, there needs to be a way to burn that asset and then remint and issue to the rightful owner. And so if you were able to do that, then you don't need a clawback. You don't need a way to pull it back. You would just basically burn it. The issuer would burn it and then remint that to the correct person that was supposed to have it to begin with. There's NFT protocols and smart contracts that allow for that now, and I prefer that over the clawback provision that's been issued on the XRPL. So we'll see, what that shakes out to be. But you make a really good point here. Anything that's in a liquidity pool or an AMM, not going to be able to have the clawback provision or that feature enabled. But XRP itself, there is no capability to claw that back or freeze it. And we do provide, loans against it in qualified custody. And maybe that's the other thing I would mention here for David. We have institutional partners that other people don't. As DeFi gets built out in the long term, there's a lot of people that just want to do this themselves. More power to you. If you just want financial advice and maybe like consult, we can provide that capacity. Or people may completely do it themselves, and they will spend the time and learn how to do this and watch their investments and move from liquidity pool to liquidity pool to be able to earn interest and rebalance their portfolios on a regular basis. Some of the family offices I work with, or the matriarch or the patriarch, is still extremely involved in how the capital and the money is invested every single day. And then there's other people that I work with that are much more passive, that would rather leave a portion of that up to professionals with still a lot of oversight. So everybody's different. Everybody's at a different stage in their life. Everybody has a different expertise and how they want to spend their time. And so that would be the other thing I would say is, if you're looking for a trusted party to help you in kind of like a spectrum of ways, we're good with all of those. Let's see here. This person, Mighty Tones, mentioned this. He says XMR, XTZ, XEM, XVerge, etc. Are these X assets international in the same sense XRP and XLM? Yes. Yeah, they're agnostic. They're not specific to any jurisdiction. And that's why they have that X in front of them in their ticker. And it also makes it look cool. And it might also have to do with Elon Musk. But yeah, that's the real reason why is the international transfer and trade of the asset. Walled Garden says, if we work with DWP, would all of our gains be passive since you would be managing our assets? So I'll say this. If assets are brought to us, we don't take profits or share in the revenue of anything that's brought over. So if you have XRP and it's brought to us, we don't get anything on the upside of the asset itself. The only way that we generate revenue for the firm is putting that to work through avenues that we have to be able to generate returns for you. So just make that clear. I don't think that's exactly what you asked here, but I just wanted to say that for people, because that's a question we get often, like, well, if my XRP goes from 100 to 1,000 or 10 to 1,000 or whatever it is, do you get, the waterfall? Does it apply to that? And the answer is no. If assets are brought directly to us and we didn't do anything to earn the rewards, then we're not entitled to them. But you said, would all of our gains be passive since you would be managing the assets? I mean, yes. People still want some oversight, right? So depending on if you completed the gift to the trust or not, or whatever circumstance you have for your estate, you may still be capable of managing the asset. There's some people that want a very hands-on approach. They want to be the one doing that. They just want some oversight and partnership and somebody to provide the accounting and reporting and billing and all of the other things that we do aside from just the management of the assets. And then we have a full suite of other professionals that do the tax planning and the estate planning and concierge service and private security and a bunch of other things that are ancillary to, just the management. But for DWP in particular, I guess you could say that, if you didn't really want much oversight, you just wanted the reports on whatever cadence you wanted to check in and verify that things were going well and have a conversation to make sure that things were going well, then I would consider that passive. Yeah. You don't have to really deal with it if you don't want to, and we can definitely put it in positions that are, not risky at all, that generate good yield for our clients. And if that's the way that people want to be, then we're happy to accommodate them. And again, I'm not an advisor there. We have Connor and Matt, and we have a few other people that we're onboarding that do have their Series 65 and can provide financial advice. So just disclaimer here. Nothing said here is financial advice, only for entertainment and educational purposes only. But, obviously, I got a stake in the firm, and so I want it to do well, and I am happy to answer any questions around it. Brenda says she needs all of us to help her. All the things that we work and have to be able to help her manage her wealth and participate in SPVs. Yeah, so we do run private deals in the mastermind group, separate of anything that we do for Digital Wealth Partners. Digital Wealth Partners will have access to a lot of different private investments. Just because of conflicts of interest, DWP cannot offer clients there anything that I'm involved with as a general partner or anything from the mastermind. We do keep those things very separate for compliance and regulatory reasons. But you'll have options across the board if you're working with us in any capacity. Let's see here. CJ says, you're the best. I don't know if I'm the best, but I really do appreciate the kind words. He says, what does R3 do if it uses XRP for settlement? I love XRP, just not well versed on R3. LFG. So R3 has a smart contract platform and protocol called Corda. And the investment banks are who started R3. They were the main investors. Basically what it does is it allows for siloed permission private networks that the banks use that have smart contract capability with oracles and all the stuff that you would need to be able to run those environments. And you can have specific oversight, build out nodes and current environments for specific tokenized real world assets, be able to trade those in those siloed permission environments, and then be able to, settle and use some of the components of the XRPL to provide benefits in those ecosystems. Similar to Ripple, right? They don't have, R3 does not have a settlement token. They use XRP or another asset network to be able to settle whatever's the most liquid is what they choose in most circumstances. So if you're, exchanging things between environments is when they would do that. Internal to their own ecosystems, you're just swapping value. There doesn't need to be an intermediary to be able to do that inside of smart contracts and the other things that they provide. So I think that they're going to be a huge player. I think that they are a sleeping giant, and people really just don't realize all the stuff that's been built out on Corda and developed by R3 in tandem with other large financial bodies that likely will come to the forefront, on the other side of the implementation and utility of these assets. Jabril says, how can we book an appointment with you or Mikkel for a consultation? So again, I don't do the financial advice side of things. We do have initial consults. You can book that through digitalfamilyoffice.io, or you can go to digitalwealthpartners.net and go book a time there. It takes you to the same people, irrespective. And if you wanted to book specifically with me, there's a link for that. And if you want to book specifically with Mikkel, there's a link for that as well. Let's see here. Tristan, maybe this would be considered financial advice. Hope not. But will the hype or crypto cycles of global liquidity still apply? Will the hype or cycles of global liquidity still apply? Do you think that speculation will become irrelevant? Ooh, irrelevant. Definitely not financial advice. There's no specific assets here that I'm endorsing or speculating will go to a certain price or predicting. I mean, so market cap. Brad Garlinghouse has said that he sees crypto going to 5 trillion in the market cap by the end of this year. I would agree with that. I do think that we're in for at least a double, maybe more from here. Would speculation even exist if there's utility on these networks? You'd have to have a lot of money to move these networks with speculation on the other side of it. It's not to say institutions don't, because they definitely do. But yeah, I think that manipulation, if that's what you're talking about here specifically in these markets, likely dissipates as we do see more value move onto the networks. Like as an example, if you look at the S&P 500 or the Dow or another index, the Russell 2000, to get it to move just 1% one direction or the other takes billions of dollars, right? And right now with $1 billion, you can move a whole market in crypto, like a lot, like 10s, 20s, 30s, sometimes 100%, depending on what market cap or how low of a market cap the asset has, or how liquid or illiquid it is, right? So I would say, do you think the speculation will become irrelevant? I would say yes. I think as we have more utility of these networks and the value moves over them at scale for them being used in certain circumstances, I think that the manipulation and how volatile they are on today will become significantly reduced or not exist at all. John Blazer, he says, Jake, any chance PolySign IP will still get used via licensing or direct purchase? How do you see that playing out for pre-IPO investors? What's your exposure amount? I'm not going to say what the exposure amount is here in a public forum. I'll speak to the former question, though. It's possible. That's not what you wanted to hear. PolySign IP could be acquired, or PolySign could be acquired, and somebody could use it. I think a lot of it. So I found a patent for AtomicNet early on. Before I even reached out to PolySign, it was one of the first things I talked to them about when I had called them up first. And that patent had been abandoned. And so you can do that, prior to the term of your 7 years for the IP and the patent. You can abandon it, and then it's kind of open source. It allows other people to reference it and use it in their technology. And that patent in particular had 355 other patents that referenced that patent in their technology, all filed by BNY Mellon, Goldman Sachs, Fidelity, a lot of them by USAA, which was crazy. Bank of America, tons of financial institutions all reference that patent in their patents. So I think, similar to Ripple gifting the protocol to the Internet Consortium and making it open source where anybody could develop on it or run transactions and do things with it. I think, and like Tesla too. Okay, so Tesla, or not, Elon and Tesla, he made the battery open source so other people could use it in their electric cars. And obviously, he's still done pretty well since then because it's proprietary. A lot of the other stuff that he does, and he's got, a huge market presence at this point. And there's, multiple other factors there as well. But is there a possibility for licensing? I think a lot of people have the components of what they needed out of the IP that they developed there at PolySign. And I think that'll benefit people in ways that they probably don't comprehend yet. So the IP itself, might be similar to like a Bitcoin at this point. I think it's still ironclad custody. Their custody solution, Project Mosaic, fantastic. Some of the best custody software that I've ever worked with. And, we, obviously are working with other custodians now that have very similar software and have insurance that's actually greater than what they had at standard custody. But you know, the DTCC and BNY Mellon and a lot of these other parties that'll transact and settle things with atomic swaps and settlements, I think maybe garnered enough from what was abandoned that allowed them to build and iterate on top of that and create their own systems and solutions to compete against or with PolySign, and provide those things for their clients and be interoperable with one another because they all reference the same components. So, you know, we'll see. It's not to say that that couldn't happen. I don't think it's likely at this point. They've really hauled out everything there and sold off MG Stover and standard custody. However, they do still have assets in the company. And I don't think it's going to be a bankruptcy situation. I know a lot of people are concerned about that. I don't think that that's the way it's going to go. I think people are going to get paid out eventually. I just don't know the time frame or how on that. Because again, PolySign does still have consideration that they got for standard custody from Ripple. And I think that that could become significantly more valuable later on, especially if we did see a direct listing for Ripple equity on the stock exchange. So, yeah, it's my 2 cents. I know it's probably not what you wanted to hear. There is a call for Link 2 and PolySign on Thursday for people that did have a larger allocation to that investment on their platform. STO says, can anyone on Kraken confirm here in the chat the following? Kraken's charts show all January 20th as date. Not sure what you're asking there. Mark says, what do you think will take over payments, XRP or the Lightning Network? The Lightning Network just doesn't have enough throughput in order to be able to scale to meet the needs of Visa or MasterCard or a lot of these other large infrastructures that settle payments on a daily basis. And it's just kind of a workaround. It's similar to like Matic or Polygon for Ethereum. It's a layer 2 type situation where they hold the collateral here, and then people are able to trade the interest for that collateral in a faster way and then reclaim the collateral later on. I think that things need to be on a layer 1 in order to be scalable later on and have other things built on top of them. Because if you're already at a layer 2 to be able to settle stuff, and then you've got to build things on top of that, it just becomes cumbersome to do so. So I think you need a layer 1 or a layer 0 to settle transactions. And I think XRP is poised between the two things. If they were juxtaposed here that you mentioned, either XRP or the Lightning Network, I would say XRP wins every time over the Lightning Network for the use cases that I mentioned. So if you might come up with something else that Lightning Network would work better for, and it may get adopted there, but for large enterprise payments and financial institutions, it's going to be XRP, in my opinion. Atlantic Living, do you believe the event that took place on Saturday could be starting indirect catalyst for White Swan event? Not sure what you mean by White Swan, to be honest with you. Like peace taking place? Maybe, I don't know. I don't think that's the symbol for that either. I guess give me a little more clarification around what you mean by White Swan, and I will attempt to answer that. Atlantic Living. Max says, not Lightning Network. I would tend to agree with Max, but again, there could be some use cases here that I'm missing, and if you want to point those out, happy to look at those and see if that's something that would work. Yeah, Argentina, nobody uses it. They want to say that they're using that stuff down there, and I mean they have videos of people doing it, so somebody's using it, but I just don't think it's had the adoption that a lot of people have propagated here in the U.S. X Factor says R3 gives you good cause to invest in XDC. They can definitely use XDC to settle, but I'll mention this. Until XDC has full regulatory clarity here in the U.S., either from Congress or a court ruling, it has enough liquidity to be able to provide the liquidity necessary to settle transactions at scale for R3. Not going to be using that, and they're not going to be using XRP until it has enough liquidity in it to be able to settle the transactions. But XRP does have a leg up on XDC. It actually has clarity here in the U.S. And in the conversations I've had with R3, that is one of the things they have mentioned. So just again, with a grain of salt. Thomas, he says, hey, Jake, what are the first few steps to take to mitigate taxes, etc., for people who hold smaller bags but want to be prepared? Don't sell. I know. That wasn't funny. It is the way that you would mitigate taxes, though. If you are smaller and you don't have an LLC set up or anything done, I would hold the assets even after they've appreciated. I would get them into a company or a trust of some kind, ideally an asset protection trust, or it could be a corporation or it could be an LLC. I really wouldn't hold assets in a corporation. Because if you issue stock and a creditor gets control of that, they can liquidate those assets and then pay themselves back and then hand you back the worthless stock. So I would set up an LLC if it's going to be holding an asset of some kind, and maybe a management entity that's separate of that gets paid if you wanted to mitigate what I just discussed there. But for people with quote unquote smaller bags, I don't think your smaller bags are going to be small for forever. Once they have appreciated, I would look to sell a portion of them to fund setting up the structures to be able to allow you to mitigate taxes. We accept XRP and crypto for payment. The majority of the professionals that I work with are willing to do that. You're still going to have, the tax implications because you have a basis, and then what you sold it at is going to be a transaction, and you're technically realizing those gains when you purchase something with it. So just be aware of that. I guess if I could give you one thing, like if you plan to take profit, an LLC might make sense. And it depends on what you're going to use the profit to do. If you're just paying off debts, if you're going to pay off your house, if you're going to, buy the Lambo, or you're not going to buy assets that you can use depreciation to write off the income with, or set up life insurance policies, or do a lot of the other stuff I've discussed, or make investments in companies to create cash flow, or purchase assets that cash flow, it's not really going to matter a whole lot, even if you do have it in an LLC, because you're still going to have those tax implications. You just get the full scope of the tax code to be able to offset the income that the LLC has versus it being in your personal name and a standard deduction. So that would be one thing that you could look at doing. Setting up an LLC to make sure that you can mitigate tax implications when you do take profits. But again, depending on how you're going to spend those profits, it may or may not be a good solution. What do you think is the biggest catalyst for the biggest XRP price jump in price? I think there's going to be three. I think there's going to be three jumps in price. When you say, well, you said biggest, you're going to nail me down for biggest. Is biggest percentage or the value on the other side of the jump in the difference? Because like if it goes from like 50 cents to $100, that would technically be bigger than 100 to 10,000 or 100,000 percentage wise, but not nominally. So I'm going to answer it all the ways just because I want to. So the first one I think will be Japan using XRP to be able to settle interbank settlement and then also shore up their financial system. I think they're going to have to do that at some point here in the very near future. That will cause probably, quote unquote, to my point, the largest percentage jump in an XRP price appreciation that we're going to see. Beyond that, I think the next largest jump will take place when they start settling the stock market using XRP. And I think that that'll push it, potentially for 4 digits or higher. And then, you've got commodities and some other things that'll come along. And I do think there'll be some small movements there or appreciation to be able to add those values to the network. But I think, the next, so we got Japan, we got the stock market, and then I think the last one will be derivatives. When Codius comes live and starts settling derivatives, and Ripple, migrates their business and focus there, I think that that's probably going to be another pretty substantial jump in XRP's price. So those would be my 3, and whichever one you want to call the biggest out of those 3 would be, up to you. What do you think about this? The main vision about XRP hitting $10,000 overnight. It is just fun to talk about. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I would love to be wrong and have that happen. There'd have to be so many things in the background already built out that we have no clue about that all get turned on at one time. And you'd have to have enough liquidity in XRP from other means to start pegging those networks and start using those at scale to continue to drive price up to that valuation. I mean, 5-digit XRP in that short of time. I'm like, man, I don't think so on that one. Like I mentioned before, I can see a circumstance where we could see 50 or 100. Swift or Japan starting to use it at scale. That's fair. I could see that. Stock market, coming in and pushing, because that's 100,000 to 160,000 transactions per day, and they're not small transactions between the clearinghouse and the brokers. I think that's pretty significant. And then derivatives. Derivatives is really where we're going to see 5 digits, I think. I will, we've been on about an hour now, and we have a pretty good audience. If you would mind just smashing that like button, it does help the algorithm, gets this out to other people. And as always, if you are getting some value from this, please share it with a friend. Good questions, Mark. We're back to the top of the chat here, so I'm going to scroll on down to the bottom and see what we have for. This one's interesting. Eric D. XRP. Just kind of rolls off the tongue there, Eric. When bringing assets on chain, is it all about BlackRock's AUM or just daily trade volume or whatever BlackRock would be doing? So Securitize is primarily for the tokenization of private funds. So like hedge funds or private equity funds or private investment. That total market right now is around 16 trillion globally. The stock market alone, the U.S. stock market, I believe, is over 600 trillion. So a little bit bigger in current value than real world assets or private investments. BlackRock, so AUM, so there's a couple different things here. Assets under custody and assets under management are 2 different things. Like BNY Mellon has like $69 trillion worth of assets under custody, and they've got about 9 trillion under management. BlackRock themselves, I think they have about 9. They're probably back up to 10 trillion, 11 trillion under management at this point, and they have their fingers in pretty much everything as far as traditional stocks go. The indexes, large cap stocks, they own large portions of each one of those. I'm having a hard time understanding exactly what you're trying to ask here. You said, when bringing assets on chain, is it all about BlackRock's AUM or just daily trade volume or whatever BlackRock would be doing? I don't know. I don't have the root of the question here. Does that was causes price appreciation of assets on the chain or the network that they're bringing those assets onto? Or I guess give me a little bit further clarification of what the question is here, Eric. Like, I have the context. I just need a little bit better understanding of what exactly you want to know. Tristan says, do you recommend fixed indexes annuities as a way to diversify after liquidity event? If you want a really, low risk way to get an insurance product that's going to pay you in perpetuity and be situated, I think they're great. Boring is good. On the other side of this, like, this stuff is sexy and it's awesome and you make all this money and it's volatile and it's crazy and you have all this dopamine. On the other side of this, people need to be boring if you want to maintain your wealth. You want to look at the benefits. Like, when I talk to family offices and I discuss anything north of 12% APY, they don't want anything to do with it. They're like, it's too risky. Don't want to touch it. Not interested. Thanks. So if that tells you anything about their mindset, and they're looking, the wealthiest people in the world want return of their capital before they're looking for return on their capital. Okay. And what that means is when you put your money to work, it's keeping up with inflation. Period. You're maintaining the amount of wealth that you've made. If you've already made $1 billion and that's the current value of that capital, next year you need to have earned probably 8% returns on that money just to have held the value of that money and its purchasing power in the economy. If you got 10%, then you probably you got out ahead a little bit, right? You had a real return on your money. And that's why family offices are willing to pay 1 or 2% to analysts and people that are finding deals and sourcing all of the best stuff and making sure that their capital is put to work and they're earning interest on their money that outpaces inflation. Because, if they managed it all and they made a 5% mistake with $1 billion, that's $50 million that you just flushed down the drain because you made a tax mistake or something else that you missed because you didn't know, right? And so it's well worth, 1% or 2% of the total assets under management to be able to pay all the best professionals in a certain expertise or area to make sure that you're not making those types of mistakes and that they are outpacing inflation substantially. I got way off track there. So, but for the average person, especially for closer to retirement, you're going to be looking at boring stuff that produces somewhere between 8 and 12% returns on an annual basis. You're going to get a small real ROI in most of the time, depending on what inflation is. If you're doing that, and indexed annuities, over the long term, hard to beat them. Stephen G says something is up with Kraken. I talked to Kraken yesterday. So I haven't been on their website today, though. So something could be up with their UI. They're not going anywhere. Extremely confident on that. We didn't think FTX and some of the other ones, or Celsius or Voyager, were going to go anywhere, and they did. So I could be wrong, but just the relationship that I have with them indicates that they're very buttoned up, very compliant, institutional grade, and I don't think they're going anywhere. So if you are having problems, something's wouldn't be overly concerned about it. STO says buy a Lambo. Tisk. When XRP hits $1,000, you don't drive anymore. You get at least 2 full-time drivers and some goons to protect you, maybe a tank. I actually was looking at this earlier today. So people think that the lavish car is stupid. If you're not going to use it to meet people, to make connections and do deals or make more money, I would agree. If you're not going to be a part of a car club or go to car events or use it in some capacity to create connections and more value within your life and ecosystem and circle, silly. But if you use it for that, it can definitely pay for itself. It can be a business expense if you're using it in the marketing. So like if you're a content creator and your Lambo is in your videos, or if it's used in your marketing for your firm or whatever you do, then you can write it off. You're going to get audited if you do it, most likely. So it does really need to be a legitimate expense for whatever you're doing, and it does need to be pertinent to your business. So just be aware of that if you're going to go that route. But it can be used and then benefit you if you look at it the right way and you're what's the right word? Specific about how you use it, or intentional about how you use it is the word I was looking for. But yeah, tank and goons and private security for sure. Like maybe it's a bulletproof Lambo. I got a guy. I really do have a guy that could get you, if you bought a Lambo, make it bulletproof for you. So let me know. Teresa says, last question. Thanks, by the way. Absolutely, brother. Thank you for the good questions. What's your take on stocks, bonds, and commodities all being tokenized on to Interledger? Now Micah is live, and apparently companies are starting the tokenizing of assets. It's definitely going to happen. ILP, it's where it's at. Interledger protocol, distributed ledger technology, DLT, the XRPL, Hyperledger, Hedera Hashgraph. That is the move in 2024. All of these public networks are looking for people that are willing to tokenize real world assets on their platforms or on their protocol. And Interledger protocol allows for the interoperability between those, right? So I would say yes to all of the above. I think that real estate and some other asset classes might take a little bit longer, but stocks, bonds, commodities, treasuries are already happening. Like that was the super boring, but people got that. Like USDC and Circle and a bunch of other people tokenizing treasuries all day long. That's kind of the first real world asset that's been tokenized. And there's actually a want for it in some capacity. So that's the other thing, is the buy side of these just really don't exist yet until you have adoption at scale and you have digital identity and custody and oracles and all the other things to talk about. It's just going to sit there illiquid. It doesn't provide a whole lot of benefit. Atlantic Living has given me a bit of a breakdown here. A white swan is an event that can have a significant impact on the economy. Okay, so kind of like a black swan, but like not as bad, I guess. My question was unclear, sorry. Do you think Trump attending Bitcoin convention is a big catalyst for the space? I think it's definitely bringing attention, right? I think voters, there's a lot of people that like Trump. And there's people like Biden too. I won't get into my political biases here. I do think that politicians moving into this space and having an opinion on it and making it a pivotal piece within their campaigns does have implications for the space as a whole, and likely will be a catalyst to get the SEC to lighten up and or remove Gary Gensler and the stymie that's been put in place, and we start seeing some adoption of things. But the Bitcoin rally, like, if I were Trump, that's what I would attend, because that's what everybody knows. It's marketing, right? Does Trump really know what's going on with the quantum financial system and all this other stuff that people talk about? I can tell you that RFK has no clue. So, smart guy, sharp guy, talks about the issues, no idea on this stuff. And people, they'll go in and be like, oh, Ripple met with the president, or oh, Ripple met with this. They're going in there to like explain this stuff to them, because most of them have no clue. on what these networks are or what they do or the benefits they provide. They're having to educate them to the point where Congress is just now like, oh, okay, this stuff could be good. Like we thought it was for money laundering and child sex trafficking and all this other stuff that would be bad and we should ban it. But now we're understanding it would actually provide some efficiencies and liquidity in our economy and like other benefits that we just didn't know about because we hadn't been educated on it. So I think it's still going to take some time for politicians and a lot of these people that have been in positions for an extended period of time to actually come to grips and understand what this stuff is and does. But I do think that, becoming a political tension point between the parties is definitely going to open people's mind to the space and get them to start looking into it, which is good. Mighty Tone says, be totally boring on the other side, but add a pina colada. Yes. Yeah. When you look, if you got $100 million and you can make 5% on it every single year, you get $5 million worth of income, $600,000 per, well, what is that? If it was $6 million a year, it'd be $500,000 a month in income. You can do a lot of stuff with that. Like I tried to build out, my most lavish lifestyle that I could think of, and like spending, a couple $100,000 a month. I don't know what you do with the rest of it. Donate it, like go help homeless people. Like if your cup's overflowing like that, like you do a lot of cool, great stuff for society. So, and I think there's going to be a lot of my clients that are in that position on the other side of this. And as long as, again, we're getting return on their money, our number one rule for digital wealth partners is don't lose XRP. And the second rule is refer to rule number 1. So that is priority number 1 is don't lose XRP, don't risk it, don't put it in a position where it could have, impermanent loss or cause problems or get taken. And beyond that, we want to make sure that we're generating returns for clients. So, and if you get $100 million and you're putting it to work and if you're making 10% a year, that's $10 million a year. That's enough to pay for, a lot of staff to make sure that stuff's buttoned up and done correctly and situated. Advisors, health coach, like do it up. That's the other thing on the other side of this that I probably will splurge on is mentors and coaches, people to hold me accountable and make sure that I'm being the best person that I can be. I would say that, if you haven't thought through that, maybe something to look into. A lot of people have self-discipline. I have a high level of self-discipline, but even I like slip up and have the cookie or do whatever else. But if I have to send photos, over to a coach or weigh in, or, somebody's looking over my books with me or my business with me or different components of my life, my marriage, and they're going to hold you accountable and ask questions, you're not going to do the stuff that you shouldn't be doing, and a lot of people, very, very few people can hold themselves to that level of standard without outside counsel. So that's one of the things that I'll definitely be looking into on the other side of this. Surround yourself with good people and people that are at your level or higher, hopefully. CS2424 says, what price levels do you plan to take profits? Hopefully I don't ever have to take profits. Hopefully I can just borrow against my assets with low LTV and reasonable interest rates, and my assets continue to appreciate. I can take that capital and put it to work somewhere that generates enough to service the debt and pays me a difference, and I'm able to use the depreciation on the investments to be able to offset my income every single year, so I never have to pay taxes, and I have a pretty decent income. And that's the plan. I don't kill the golden goose. Chad Steinberger put out a really good post earlier today. If you guys didn't see that one, where he talked about 3 different categories for taxes. The last one where people don't pay taxes, they borrow against their assets, and then they put it to work to be able to earn income in some capacity, and wherever they're putting it to work, they have the capability to offset that income with depreciation or other ways to mitigate taxes. So that's the name of the game. You know, if you don't know the rules and you can't play it, you can't win. But that's the stuff that, you know, we're happy to help you with all those things on the other side of this. So I'm not really concerned about where to take profits because I don't plan on necessarily taking profits. Almost an hour and a half in. Probably going to wrap it up in here in about 5 minutes. X Factor says Trump's VP pick has 250K in Bitcoin. Yeah, JD Vance. I think that was a good call. He's a younger guy. You know, people are already finding stuff about him in crypto. Him giving talks on it. He already razzed Gary Gensler earlier this year, so I think it's a good play. I think that he'll do really well, and I'm glad to see that Trump picked somebody that is pro crypto. So, Trade Like a Pro says, "Can I earn a yield with XRP that is 100% safe?" Yes. Yeah. That's what we've orchestrated, right? So it's held in institutional custody. It never leaves your account. It's insured. We're able to put it to work with our partners to be able to earn, you know, enough to pay the fees on custody and what we provide plus some extra at this point. And, you know, it's somewhere between 2 and 5% that gets paid to you on the asset, and no cost, all upside, and you get qualified custody and the insurance and all the other benefits that we provide. And then, you know, as things progress and there are more opportunities and DeFi gets built out on the XRPL, definitely going to be looking at all those things. But again, you know, our number one goal is don't lose XRP. And until pseudo accounts, XLS64D is the amendment. Until that one's passed, it'd be hard to participate in DeFi protocols without, you know, being able to delegate the liquidity into whatever that is without actually putting the XRP in there and experiencing potential and permanent loss and other things. So, but the answer to your question here is yes, and we do have the solution for that at Digital Wealth Partners. Let's see. Vincent Johnson says, "How can you avoid gas fees trying to move XRP to a wallet?" You can't. That's not a thing. But they're super minimal. It's not like Ethereum or Bitcoin where they just eat you alive. It's like 0.0000012 XRP to send a transaction from, you know, your exchange to your wallet, and the exchange might take 1 XRP for doing it, but the fee on the network is minuscule. It's like less than a penny to move $1 million. So I've never even heard anybody ask this question, but you know, if you haven't ever moved XRP and you've only moved Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's definitely relevant, because when you move those assets, you're going to get eat up with fees. XRP, you don't have to worry about that. You know, Insane Clown Posse is no. I know what you're talking about. Internet Computer Protocol. I think it's interesting, the CME thing that came out the other day with XRP and ICP. I think that ICP probably is a sleeper. I kind of think it's competition to Hedera, and maybe I just don't understand what it is or how it works. I've always thought Hedera would end up with the majority of the dApps built out for Web3. Internet Computer seems to be competing in that market. But again, you know, if they're just going to end up being like an Oracle or a price feed mechanism, Chainlink is already seeing some pretty significant adoption there in enterprise applications. Most of it's EVM stuff, though. So maybe ICP comes in. I think it's interesting. I think the all-time high, like $750, was something crazy for the speculation on that deal, and then the founders dumped on people. But again, if you need liquidity and you started a project and you want some to take money off the table, like, who's to say that you? I don't get mad at founders that do that. I think that it ruins some of the integrity for their project, but I don't get mad at them. I understand why they would do it. Yeah, I think that it could be used. I need to learn more on it, really. I need to take more time and read about it and understand it in greater detail to be able to give you an educated, like, thought pattern and where it's going to be used and how. So I'll take some time over the next week and take a look at that. And if you circle back around with me, hopefully I have a better answer for you. Edward says, what percent interest do you think you can make with XRP? Like today or in the future? I don't have a time constraint with this. Today, as I mentioned, I think, we can very safely earn people somewhere between 2 and 5% if they're going to work with us on their XRP. And again, that's held in institutional custody with insurance, segregated vaults. You're insured up to $100 million in crime insurance. You get a lot of those benefits, and then other opportunities as well that we'll bring to the table for private investment and other options. But yeah, I think that's what we can generate today and in a safe way. But in the future, once we have AMMs and we've really kind of fleshed that out and we have institutional adoption of that, I think the sky's the limit on what you'll actually be able to earn with XRP in some of those ecosystems. And that's some of the stuff that we're going to be looking at, be able to participate in and be able to deploy clients' capital into, always, mitigating risk to the utmost degree. But I think that there's potential for 20+% returns on an annual basis on your XRP in liquidity pools and AMMs when those things are live on the network. PD Den says, Jake, if I join Digital Wealth Partners, will I also have access to the Beyond Broke platform, or are they separate? So the mastermind is separate of Digital Wealth Partners. Happy to throw that in, especially like if it's just a social membership. We can figure out how to do that. But yeah, they tend to be two separate things. Again, I have to be careful on this because we do run private deals in the mastermind. Those deals cannot be offered through the RIA. They have to be kept separate. And so therefore we have segregated entities that deal with that. So depends on what you want. If you're looking more for private investment, this is great. If you're looking more for, wealth management, custody, advice on structuring your estate and all that stuff, Digital Ascension Group and Digital Wealth Partners are going to be what you're looking for. And then, we talk about all that stuff over here too. Mondays and Saturdays, we have town halls in there. And then for Carbon 2, we do have some business owners that run businesses of, 7, 8, 9 figures. We get together on Sundays and really run things down and talk about, a little bit more technical stuff on the estate planning, how to generate revenue, private investments, some higher level stuff. So would love to see you in there if that's something you're interested in. Or, if you want to have a consult with Digital Wealth Partners or Digital Ascension Group, also would love to provide that as well. Kev is asking a question. He says, Ripple holding money transfer license, does that make them a bank? Makes them a money processor. So they could be a bank. They'd have to acquire, they acquired a trust bank, which was standard custody. So technically, they are a bank now. They have a trust bank. And the money licenses that they have to be able to transact there makes them a payment processor. So, I think that they're going to move into a lot of different verticals. Again, they want to be the Amazon of payments and digital payments at scale. So, derivatives, I think, is definitely a direction that they're headed after the CME thing. Excited to see what they end up doing over the long term. This will probably be the last one to take, and then we'll wrap it up tonight. So Rob X is, live here in Australia. Capital gains here are 50%. Oh, man. You in Canada and anything under the Commonwealth is rough, brother. How can I get around that? Don't sell. Don't sell your assets. Get them into a family trust now before asset appreciation happens. You're going to have to pay some taxes, okay? There's estate taxes to be able to move them out of your name into that trust. But, or get them out of the jurisdiction that you're in. Get them over to the UAE in Dubai, or go to Singapore I have contacts there in Australia that's what they've done is they get offshore with their stuff, especially if you plan to get out of Australia and live other places. Anything under the Commonwealth, they really very specific about how long you can spend each year there before you have taxes in that locale. So I would get offshore or get your assets into a trust, and I would look at ways to leverage them and not sell, so that you don't have to worry about the capital gains. That's my 2 cents, Rob. It's a good question though, and I'm sure that there's lots of other people that are wondering the same thing. I wish I had a simpler answer for you. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up tonight. Appreciate you guys taking the time out on a Monday night to sit down with me and run things down. Great questions as always here in the chat. Soft plug at the end as always. If you do want to schedule some time with me or my team, you just go to digitalfamilyoffice.io or digitalwealthpartners.net. And if you do want to participate in the mastermind, get access to private investments and a lot of other cool people and culture, we would love to have you there. That's one's going to be mastermind.beyondbroke.com. So with that, I hope you'll have a wonderful week, and we will see you guys Wednesday night with our special guest that will be announced at a later date. So you'll have a good evening, and we'll see y'all on the next one.